I've certainly come across a good number of performances where it becomes clear within a couple of bars that no one really knows where anyone is. I think it is abundantly clear it's not what Mr. Sibelius wanted. One of the great tricks of being a concerto player on the violin is learning how to play different kinds of loud, because you basically play loud almost all the time in a violin concerto. Hello everyone, I'm James Ehnes, and today we're going to be working through one of the great pillars of the violin repertoire, the Magnificent Violin Concerto by Jean Sibelius. I'm going to encourage all of you, first thing, to pull up a copy, not just of the violin part of this piece, but of the full score. Having a full score to a piece is really an incredible resource, and we live in an amazing era where so much of this music is freely available. The first editions of the Sibelius Violin Concerto are all out of copyright. There's no excuse for not being able to find one. Pull it up, because we are going to be talking a lot about how this piece is quite particular. Sibelius has a unique musical language, and I think a lot of clues to how that language speaks and communicate is really within the text itself. Of course, many of you are going to be learning this with piano, and that's where I will start, is making the observation that there are two reductions, piano reductions of this piece that I'm aware of. They're different in quite a crucial way. If you've got your score in front of you, you'll see that the first violins and the second violins play in mirror image to one another at the very beginning. The first violins, the outside first violins, that is to say, play. Now the outside second violins play. So some piano reductions have one, some have the other. It's pretty important to know which one it is, and I will give you a bit of advice when you play this with an orchestra. If you have the chance to do that, find one player to lock into and know what it is they're playing. Now, often, just spatially, you will be closest to, say, the leader, the concertmaster. So if you can lock into that playing, you will know where it is, because it's very, very confusing. And it's intentionally so. You will hear these notes oscillating in and out. And I've certainly come across a good number of performances where it becomes clear within a couple of bars that no one really knows where anyone is. So yeah, that's best avoided. Now, when you start this piece, it's a very curious indication, right, from the beginning, where it says mezzo forte. Now, who starts a concerto mezzo forte? By its very definition, that seems like kind of a non-committal type of emotional statement. And I think that there's something to that. This is not piano and it's not forte. And I think too often we do hear, it's tempting to sort of sneak in with something, but that's not what this music is. That is a little bit too obvious. Sibelius deals so much in these ambiguities. A mezzo forte, to me, this is a voice that is speaking, but it is not telling you anything too strongly yet. That is, in a way, the kernel for what this opening statement is. What does he do after that? That to me is a commentary on that first interval, I guess you'd say. Now on that D, you'll see that right when that D starts, there is a hairpin, that it starts to grow. In the way that we would converse, you say something and you reflect upon what that is. And as you reach the end of that reflection, that begins to turn into an expansion of that idea. And you're not quite finishing that thought. It's worth pointing out that the violin plays for quite a long time before there is a single rest. I mean, in the solo violin part, it's a fair ways down the page before there's a first rest. And it's a mighty short one. very tiny, but that breath is fascinating, and it's fascinating that it comes that late. It's very conversational to me. There is an idea that's introduced and reflected upon, and you get a little bit more sure of yourself, but then you're not entirely sure, and then it goes somewhere else. When you get to that point, that is the first truly dramatic statement where you're kind of grabbing the listener. The way that it is rhythmically constructed, I think, is very interesting too. It's tempting to sort of round off some of these rhythms, to be very free with it. You know, we want it to be conversational, we want it to be free, we want it to have a slightly improvisational element, but I believe quite strongly that it's all written in there. You know, the way that he uses dots and double dotted things and triplets in a way within reason. The stricter you are with those rhythms, it creates a flexibility with the orchestra, with these quavers or eighth notes just running consistently, the triplets going around it, the way they bend. I think sometimes in an attempt to seem free, people will turn the triplets into something that match up a little too cleanly with the eighth note accompaniment, and that defeats the purpose entirely. As we go on, we have the poco forte. It is just a poco forte. It's introducing it. It's more. Now I go up there to a harmonic on the D string, which is a tradition of some. I like it. You don't have to do it. So from figure one, the music takes on a very interesting character, and we have this feature that is reasonably unique. Of Sibelius will write slurs often over rests. And now what can this mean, right? A slur implying a connection and a rest implying a stop. Well, I think there's a difference between a hard stop and a stop that is still breathing through it. No, I'm actually breathing quite loudly now, which is maybe not ideal, but to give the idea that this music is not stopping. There are ideas that are breathing within it, and they create this sense of finding something. Know where the downbeat is, even if the music is somewhat offset, know exactly where you are. The way that he starts using quite a bit of ink, showing these hairpins going up and down in little sforzandi, and these dynamic indications showing that the music is surging. And to me, it's quite wave-like, that the music will, like a wave, it will build and it will crest and it will recede. And Sibelius takes such great pains to show that. We get into things like these fortes on each of these notes. These are like crests of waves, and they recede. And that is very counterintuitive to often how we learn to play the violin. And I think that sometimes in this piece, you hear a struggle between what Sibelius is asking for musically and what we feel the need to do violinistically. As I say, it can feel physically quite counterintuitive, and I think that is why Sibelius, as a violinist, took such great pains to be very explicit that these things taper. They always taper. Famously, the way that has the hairpin coming down for that note is so crucial, and so many violinists, they just can't find it in themselves to do that, because we always want to be the big violin hero. Well, that is a decision one can make. I think it is abundantly clear it's not what Mr. Sibelius wanted. I think that in that passage, you go up screaming to this climax, and there's almost a sense of not embarrassment, but indecision. You say it and you're not sure, and then the orchestra at the end of that bar, ba-bam, really asks that question. You say something, oh, I don't know about that, da-dum, and then double down on that again. So all these ideas of conversation, I think, are so crucial in this piece. And I'm going to be referring to the text over and over and over because there are these details that, as I said, he went to such great pains to be very specific about it. He writes a piacere, at your pleasure, but notice where he writes it. He writes it in the second beat, which is to say, you really shouldn't be taking so much time in that first beat. I often hear it. Another beat is created. And I think the breathless quality of all of that happening within the first beat is very important. If you want to take a little bit of time on those broken chords going up, fine. But I think that the breathless quality of that is important. Make sure that you stay as close to in time as you can with that. So we get into this passage of the veloce. I think this has a natural up and down quality, very much building with the range. Again, starting at a mezzo forte, there's something in reserve there. It is not quite so obvious right away. There are different solutions in terms of fingerings, but it's quite obvious to say it that it should be really clean, but this passage can be quite difficult. Watch the shifts going down in particular. However you change your fingerings, that's immaterial, but we don't want to hear, which can happen. The beginning of the largamente, I think it's very important, no matter how much time you take on that first E flat, to show that that starts on beat 2, which is to say a weak beat. It does not start on the third beat in the half measure, because it often sounds that way, and then as the passage progresses, we feel like we are one beat apart from where we should be. I think there's also a very different character of something that starts on a weak beat. It is naturally a little bit more questioning, takes a little bit more time to ramp up. From a technical standpoint, these arpeggiations I think it's very important to think of them as units from a technical standpoint so that we don't end up moving the left hand while the right arm is still creating sound. We don't want something blurry. We want them self-contained. And then really getting defined definition on this upper voice once those accents come in place. People sometimes change the point at which he writes the transition between the two notes slurred, the two notes separate, and then all separate. I think it's quite good to keep it as he wrote it, that the change from two slurred, two separate to all separate happens precisely in the middle of the third bar of the largamente, and really be, as I said before, as clean as possible in this passage. Make sure that we're not getting any remnants of shifts. Think of things in terms of blocks of hand position. As we are in this passage, from this bar, I would really go for an effect of two violins. You have a separate line on top. As much separation as you can get, it provides a very interesting effect, and don't give up on the way down. Really keep it going. In this score, the accents disappear by the last bar, so okay, sure, maybe at that point it becomes a little bit more consistently ground out. Here, at this tempo 1, we're going to cheat a little bit, because at figure 2, you'll see that there is a very strict conversion that he's written of quarter note to quarter note, crotchet to crotchet. At this tempo 1, if we want to push the tempo a little bit as we go up the broken octaves, we get into a much more natural conversion of quarter to quarter. This is a transition that should be very simple and rarely is. And that idea of just pushing ever so slightly, I think, does create for a little bit more of a comfortable musical seam, so to speak. As the music of this 2D starts to wind down, we come to this spot at figure 3 where once again there is rubato basically built into this. If we play it quite strictly within the framework of where we are, it creates a natural sort of swimming tension. The largamente itself, I think I would be very aware of creating a long phrase. What we often hear is being one thing and being another. I think they are very much the same phrase. And if you take a look, again, finding these little clues in the text, the hairpin, and then it closes, and then it's a small rest, but that is where the rest is. That is when it closes. These little rests, they're important. Make sure that there's that little breath. And then as this music winds down, remember that it goes from something that is ostensibly in a forte into a mezzo forte. Now here's a little clue to Sibelius's notation. That second one there, that last statement of that D flat to A flat, he has literally written right on top of one another a hairpin going up with a diminuendo implying the music is going down. And I think that both of those things are achievable. There is a gesture to the hairpin, but there is an arc to the actual dynamic. And we're now on one of my favorite details of the piece. Now, at this point, we have the orchestra play leading into. First of all, make sure you make that connection between the orchestral pizzicato or the piano. Dum bum 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 bum. This version, you start pianissimo. And it opens up to a mezzo piano. Now, this is important, and it will become very important because the second time through, which we'll talk about when we get to it, is different. And if you shape this as he asks for here, it will pay great dividends later within the arc of how the movement actually really works. So you get to the top at a mezzo piano. Be very aware, if you're playing this with orchestra for the first time, be very aware the conductor is going to need to cue that second beat. It's very crucial. Make sure that's together. Now, this poco a poco meno moderato, what exactly does that mean? I think that this is starting to get back into an allegro. And this passage, I think, can really develop the entire way through to the allegro molto. And when I say that, we go down these broken octaves. We then add a forte. The diminuendo starts in the second half of that bar. Orchestral pits, dum bum 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 bum. Now let's take a careful look at this passage that is so notorious. Now this is difficult, and there's no getting around that. This is a complicated thing to do. Take a look at those notes. They are, each one of them has a dash with a dot. What does that mean? And we're still within that diminuendo. Now look at the next ones. Dots, that's different. That's a different kind of thing in that crescendo. Now we have dashes. Each one of those is very different. Now, it's hard to do, so we tend to just kind of do them all the same and just count our blessings when we get through it unscathed. But it's so interesting if you can point out that difference. So think about that.